Back in April of 2020, I decided to do my very first Nuzlocke. Quarantine had been around for about 2 weeks now, and so in my boredom, and being inspired by Jaden's Nuzlocke video, I did my own Nuzlocke. In 2021, I started posting a comic I made of that Nuzlocke, and here I am now to make a semi-animated video for it. Quick rundown of Nuzlocke rules. You can only catch the first encounter of each area, nickname each Pokemon you catch, and if a Pokemon faints, is considered dead and cannot be used anymore. However, for this Nuzlocke, I used certain extra rules. Not hardcore rules though. While I did use Dupe's Clause, which says you can't catch an evolutionary line you've caught before, I use a different version of Dupe's Clause. The typical version of Dupe's Clause says a first encounter is a duplicate. You can skip that Pokemon, reroll for a new one. However, what I did, if my first encounter was a duplicate, then I lost out on encounter for that area entirely. Definitely in Arkham Menaces there are so many routes, especially early game, where there are duplicate encounters. But I was confused on what Dupe's Clause actually meant. No legendaries and trading, and I can only use a maximum of 3 items per battle, which I find pretty interesting in retrospect. It's like the junior version of the no items hardcore rule. But with all of that set up out of the way, let's get on to it. This is the story of how a novice Nuzlocke survived his first Nuzlocke in a mostly blind playthrough. It was my first time playing a JoJo game myself, and I will be skipping a lot of things. But if you want a more in-depth telling, you can find the same Nuzlocke in the form of a comic on my Instagram. I started the adventure by picking my first ever Pokemon in a Nuzlocke, Monopoly the Totodile. If you've watched my little Tron the Gang Nuzlocke, which I would not blame you if you haven't, then you know that I've decided that whenever I start a Nuzlocke, I will have a game night theme for the name of my starter Pokemon, and it started with Monopoly. After delivering Professor Elm's stuff, I bought my rival, Griffin, who I named that because I was feeling fancy, and after getting 5 Pokeballs, the Nuzlocke had begun. I met my first 2 team members, Jogger the Sentry and McBurb the Pidgey, McBurb being a name my brother came up with. Then later in Sprout Tower I caught Raichu the Rattata, who I'm sure will be a valuable asset. Falkner was easy, and then I got an egg. I was in the ruins of Alpha. I wanted to catch an unknown. You heard me right. I wanted to catch an unknown. I just wanted to see how long it would stay alive, which was not long because Jar got crit and killed the HN09 I encountered. A little annoying, but whoa, dude. Yeah, the HN09's friend did not like what Jogger did, because an unknown with the Fine type hidden power almost killed Jogger. That's rough, buddy. I caught Jafar the Ekans on my way to Azalea Town, and should have gone to Geodude in Union Cave, but instead I ran to Rattata, and because of the version of Dupe's Clause I used, I was left with no new team member. While battling against Bugsy's gym trainers, Monopoly evolved and Queen Togepi hatched, and after skipping through Bugsy, McBurb joined the fun and evolved. After dunking on Griffin, I got the Cut HM, and since Raichu failed her purpose of being an HM mule, I taught it to Jogger.
It should have been you.
But at least I got Sweet Free in the Drowsy in Route 34, which did mean I could have gotten the Machop Tree in Goldenrod City, but of course I decided against it. Knowing the notorious Whitney battle was up ahead, I trained in the underground to evolve Jogger into a Furret, and even caught Boo Boo the Nidoran. But now Whitney, she, or more specifically her Miltank, is known as a Run Ender. Miltank has a base stat total of 490, which is very high for this point in the game. Miltank is fast, so with Stomp it can flinch nearly anything you can throw at it. Attract makes male Pokemon almost useless, Rollout will increase in power each turn, and Milk Drink allows Miltank to heal itself. If I want to escape with no deaths, I need to come up with a plan, and a plan I came up with. With Jogger still knowing Defense Curl, I taught her the Rollout TM I found on Route 35. The plan? Use Whitney's Rollout game against her. As mentioned, Rollout is a move that doubles in power as it's being used. But did you know that if you use Defense Curl the turn prior, Rollout will start with double the power? Up against Clefairy, I initiated my plan. I set up not 1, not 2, but 3 Defense Curls. And after Jogger 2-hit Clefairy, the big bad Miltank was up, who Jogger just one-shot. Run under my ass. I mean, Jogger was 3 levels higher than Miltank, but still, I count this as a victory. I caught Grooge the Sudowoodo and All Night the Hoo-Hoo. I entered the next gym after getting Monopoly the Surf HM, and the combo of Monopoly and Jafar using Bite made quick work of the gym. I bowed Griffin in the Burn Tower and caught Remy the Raticate, which I now know breaks Dupe's Clause, but back then I wasn't sure. Don't worry, I never used him. On Route 38, I ran into a Miltank. I thought, cool, now I can have one, but the Miltank would not stay in any Pokeball I threw at it, so I just knocked it out. Anyways, I was training Jafar on that route and kept him against a Mr. Mime, and you can probably guess what happened. My first ever death in a Nuzlocke. A death I could have prevented had I switched out. Oh well, I'ma be real with you, Chief. Jafar just kinda sucked. His only attacking moves are Poison Sting, Wrap, and Bite. The first 2 only have a base power of 20, and Bite from Jafar only hurt things that were weak to it. So my first Nuzlocke death, but I kinda feel nothing from it. Welcome to the team, Grooge. I hope you survive longer. I caught Taser the Magnemite, got Good Boy Boy the Eevee and gave Queen a haircut. I then entered Chuck's gym, and immediately realized I should have left. Emphasis on should. Had I not switched into Monopoly, the first trainer Samonli would have two-shot McBurb. Luckily, the second trainer was easier. But then was the third trainer. Sweet Dream's confusion did disturbingly little to Machop, so I had to switch to McBurb. But then came Machoke, who knew Rock Slide. I should have researched what moves the gym trainers have, or at least should have known that Machoke could carry rock moves. While Jafar's death made me feel nothing, McBurb was different. He was the third ever Pokemon I got, and had been such an MVP, and so with my main mon for Chuck no longer with us, I trained Sweet Dream and All Night to get our revenge on Chuck. During the training, All Night evolved and learned Reflect. With this, I felt I was ready to return to the Cianwood Gym to get justice for McBurb. With Reflect and Hypnosis from All Night and Sweet Dream's confusion, Chuck was taken care of. McBurb was avenged. The rest of this run is for you, buddy. As a reward, we got the Fly HM, which allowed All Night to take us back to Allvine City. However, I needed to come up with a plan for Jasmine. My team wasn't exactly built for steel types. Sure, Grudge knew low kick, but she was still only level 20. There's Monopoly who's a Feraligatr now, but I still felt like I needed a foolproof plan. And while looking through my TMs, I realized that it was Jogger's time to shine yet again. Jogger with the Dig TM was able to one-shot both of Jasmine's Magnemites, but when Steelix was tankier than expected, I switched into Monopoly who took it out with Surf. You know, eventually, because Steelix knows Sunny Day for some reason. Sometime later, I reached a Lake of Rage where Gyarados Uno joined the team. Willingly, of course. But now was the Rocket Hideout. It was pretty easy for the most part. I mean, aside from the Vulture I wanted to catch blowing up, I wasn't frustrated at all. Until I made my biggest regret in the Nuzlocke. I was up against Adriana, using Jogger when she sent out her Murkrow. With Jogger in the red, I decided that I need to switch. And then it happened. I had lost McBurb because I didn't take the time to search up my opponent's moveset, and the same mistake got Jogger killed. I could have healed, my rule set allowed it, and I thought about doing it, but I thought I didn't need to, and Jogger paid the price for my arrogance. Monopoly came in and avenged his little sister. With Jogger's death, it left Monopoly as the only living member of what I called, the OG3. I brought in Gyarados Uno, evolved Queen, and defeated Price, and now I had to go to Goldenrod City and put an end to Team Rocket for good, for Jogger. And Sweet Dream, who a Weezing blew up. I climbed up the radio tower and was once again facing Adriana. All Night came in and showed her no mercy.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
You will.
Jogger and Sweet Dream could finally fully rest. On my way to Blackthorn City, I got Wolgirl and Ice Age 6. With Monopoly knowing Ice Punch and having never melt ice, we challenged Claire. With Queen setting up Safeguard, Claire couldn't paralyze my team. Monopoly wasn't able to one-shot 2 of Claire's Dragonairs, but on the third Dragonair, Safeguard did end. With Monopoly here, I sent in Gyarados Uno, who took out Dragonair with a barrage of Dragon Rages. I tried using Taser against Kingdra, but Thundershock just sucks. So I just went back to Gyarados Uno, and once I got the Dragon Claw, Claire had to give up her temper tantrum, and so now I was against the final challenge, the Elite Four. But Grudge did die on the way to the Indigo Plateau. I forgot to write down what killed her, but yeah, she did. And so I brought in Ice Age 6, but now it's leak time. Taser pretty much soloed Will, only need to be healed twice. But now was Koga. Sweet Koga, how I hate thee with a burning passion. Koga did what he does best and made his Pokemon to be a fucking annoyance. Ariados double team and Baton past the fortress. I sent out Ice Age 6 who wasn't able to take it out before it exploded. Luckily he tanked it. I seriously would have murdered Koga if I lost a Pokemon to his evasion shenanigans. And then there's Muck. Let me tell you about Koga's Muck. It has one attacking move, Sludge Bomb. So knowing this, I switched in Taser, my Steel type, to defeat it. This was a mistake. Because that stupid fucking Muck current hurt Taser, it resorted to using Minimize and Acid Armor every fucking turn, which meant Thundershock would barely hit, and Sword would barely do any damage. Eventually, I caved, and swapped into Ice Age 6, who needed to use Earthquake 7 fucking times to knock out Muck. And by the way, only 2 of those Earthquakes actually hit. The other 5 times just missed. At least after that, the rest of Koga's team was a sweep. And next up was Bruno, who we don't talk about because we silenced him. The reason being that every time Anna was going to use Fire on his him on top, it would end up using Detect, which gave me severe Koga flashbacks. So I just used a Hypnosis Dream Eater combo. And now we had Karen. Things have been going pretty well. Ice Age 6 was cutting through her team. But this, coupled with the fact that no one had died in a while, caused me to become a bit too comfortable. The biggest sin you can commit in a Nuzlocke, Karen only had Houndoom. Ice Age was still at 70% HP, and I thought I can start with a flamethrower. As you can expect, I was wrong. Monopoly came and fixed my mistake. But this meant I had no ice type for Lance. So this is why Blue Sky shut down. But it was time to face off against the champion of the Indigo League. Taser took a while to take out Gyarados, which has the Gyarados sending up Rain Dance. Remember this. Lance immediately sent out his ace, his level 50 Dragonite. I thought I was about to watch Taser bite the dust when Dragonite used Fire Blast, but Taser managed to just barely survive. Remember Rain Dance? Monopoly then came out to single-handedly take out Lance's 3 Dragonites and even his Charizard, leaving Lance with just Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl outsped and quickly hit Monopoly with Rock Slide, but Monopoly hit back with a powerful Surf. Both were at half health. The next turn, Monopoly hit first with Surf, but Aerodactyl just barely survived it, and it began a Hyper Beam. I helplessly watched Monopoly's health go down, and lost my breath as it happened. Monopoly survived with 20 HP. With Aerodactyl needing to recharge, Monopoly hit off one last Surf. And we had won. The championship was finally ours. But for those of you familiar with the Johto games, you know the adventure isn't done just yet. It was Kanto time. So here's a quick rundown of how that went. With Ice Age 6 down, Boo Boo came in for the spot of Ground type. But she wouldn't have any Ground type moves since I used the Earthquake TM on Ice Age 6. In Kanto, I only caught 3 Pokemon. Dog the Meowth, Paul the Abra, and Blubchub the Snorlax. After catching Blubchub, I just stopped catching Pokemon. Brock was swept by Gyarados Uno, Taser was killed by Griffin's Alakazam, being replaced by Paula, Queen almost swept Misty but died to Lapras, and the rest of the Kanto gyms were taken care of. So now there was one last challenge. Red. Boo Boo started off against Pikachu. Since only Quick Attack could hit Boo Boo, Pikachu couldn't hurt Boo Boo all that much. And since Pikachu charmed Boo Boo, she just barely couldn't knock out Pikachu, causing Red to waste all his potions. Blubchub took out Espeon, and Gyarados Uno took out Red's own Snorlax. Gyarados Uno almost took out Blastoise, before I decided it was too dangerous for him to be out. Paula surprisingly tanked a Blizzard, and with Thunder Punch took out Blastoise, which remember was special before Gen 4. Then Monopoly took out Charizard. All that was left was Venusaur. On I came in the turn that Venusaur tried to set up Solar Beam, and so I chose to use Fly, which meant that Venusaur's Solar Beam missed. Venusaur tried to set up Sunny Day, but by then it was too late. With one last United States of Fly, the battle was won. I had officially survived my very first Nuzlocke. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Drawing everything for this was definitely a tall order, but I like how it came out, and I'll let you know that I've already done a 3rd Nuzlocke, so I'll get to working on that as soon as I can. In the meantime, I do have other videos. I hope to see you all around. Have a nice day, you wonderful people.